Welcome to the Leading Your Church podcast. My name is Rich Cochran. I'll be your host as we talk about a lot of different things related to leadership and ministry in your church. One of the things I love doing, and I'm so excited to finally get this podcast relaunched and moving forward again, is I love encouraging pastors and ministry leaders. I really do believe we can learn from one another, that we can grow together, and I really do believe that God has some significant things for us to be a part of in leading our churches forward, leading change, and really it's also fun to see the change that happens within us. So in this episode today, as I was planning out January, I was going to relaunch in January. There were a few things that I thought, you know what, I really would like to talk about before the end of the year, before we all begin our new ministry year. And so today we're going to be talking about how do we finish the ministry year strong. You see, December can be so overwhelming with all the different things. A lot of times it's not things we have to do. It's just places we have to be and to be a part of. And so there's so many different things that we're a part of. And so how do we reflect? How do we celebrate? And how do we prepare for a brand new ministry year? Because one of the things I love, New Year's is one of my favorite holidays because I love being able to restart and reset. But what can we do in these last 2 or 3 weeks before we get to January 1st and start it all over again? How can we lead forward and lead our churches to accomplish the things that God has put in front of us? So I want to start with this idea of reflection and celebration. You see, God has done good work, even in hard situations and hard settings. You see, so many times we can begin to think that the work that God is doing is only where we see fast-growing churches or in really big churches, but that's not true. You see, God is active and at work all around us. Even if you've had a hard season this year, there are things you can look at and you can see God's hand at work. And so how do we take time to pause, reflect, and give thanks? So here are 3 things related to reflection and celebration that I'd like for you to consider as you begin moving these last 2 or 3 weeks into the new year. First, celebrate wins. This is one thing I am not very good at. You see, I am constantly always chasing after the next thing. And if you've been on my team, I've got staff members and team members that have given me a hard time because they think we're ready to celebrate, and I'm already talking about 9 months down the road. And so they're always like, whoa, slow down, pump the brakes. And so I think it's important for all of us to take time and celebrate wins. I want to encourage you, gather your team. Even if you don't have a large staff, identify key volunteers and core members of your church and gather together and think through what were the ministry wins. What did God do over the last 12 months? One of the things that I think is important is you may want to bring a copy of the church calendar or a copy of your calendar and see where you've been and what you've done. So it prompts your mind to begin able to think about the things that you can celebrate. And so some things you can consider here, you can look at some of the old core metrics. You can look at attendance, worship attendance, group attendance. Did you start any new Bible study groups this year? You can look at giving. You can look at all of those things, and you can look at how many people went on mission this year. What other mission projects did you do? Did you do Operation Christmas Child? Did you do Vacation Bible School? What about student camp? Did you have a revival? What's going on with senior adults? You can begin to look at the whole scope of everything you've done and begin to identify what God has done in front of you. One of the things that we celebrated one year at our church in Missouri is we moved our trunk or treat to my front yard. We lived in a neighborhood where people would come and trick or treat, and it was one of the largest places that people would gather in our community. And so we moved our trunk or treat to my front yard. We had about 8 or 9 candy stations. We gave out walking tacos, hot dogs, water, soft drinks, hot chocolate. all kinds of things that we would just give away. And so one of the things that we would celebrate is how many pieces of candy did people bring to donate that we were able to give away at our block party there at my house. You see, you don't always have to be stuck in a box on what you think about celebrating. But here's one of the things I want to remind you or encourage you. Don't miss celebrating stories. You see, God is active in people's lives. And so don't miss celebrating people's stories. So I want to encourage you as a ministry leader to celebrate the wins. The second thing I want to encourage you to do is to send thank you cards. I will say this over and over and over again. There is power in written words. I know we send emails. I know we send text. We do a lot of things because it's efficient. And I want to encourage you to pick up a stack of thank you cards and hand write thank you cards to key leaders, to volunteers, to people in your church. A heartfelt message showing appreciation can go a long way. Now, there's a trick to this, especially if you have a stack, maybe of 20, 30, 50 cards that you want to send out. You can send a heartfelt message of appreciation, and it can be 2 or 3 sentences. And so I want to encourage you to, you don't have to write a book to them. The power is in your few words, your written words that they've received. And so I want to encourage you to send thank you cards. And then the last thing I want to encourage you here is reflection and celebration is to create a year-end recap. Nowadays, there's a bunch of different easy ways that you can create a year-end recap. One of the easiest ways is if you have a newsletter that you mail out, and a lot of churches still mail out a monthly newsletter. Take that and create a space where you take those wins and put some pictures, put a little bit of words, descriptions to go with it, and celebrate what God has done this year through your newsletter. You can make a highlight video, 3, 5, 6 minutes long, just taking pictures. And somebody can talk about the things that happened in the images, and you can share those things. You see, one of the things you're doing is you're doing really 2 things. One, you're reflecting back and you're celebrating, but you're also casting vision for the next year. And so I just want to encourage you, before you race into 2025, I want to encourage you, take time to reflect and celebrate, even if it's not natural to you. The second big thing I want you to think about, so you got this one big pool of reflecting and celebrating. The next thing I want you to consider is evaluating your ministry systems. You see, systems are the way that things get done. And so I want to encourage you to evaluate what's going on. And this is where you have a chance to really take a piece of paper, take a whiteboard, and begin to take those reflections and to break up what is working well. And it's important when you evaluate not just to go to the things that are broke or the things that are negative. Make sure you recognize the things that are working well, and then begin to recognize the things that are broke or aren't bringing the same results, or I'll use a different word, a spiritual fruit. What's not bringing the spiritual fruit that you are looking at? And that's where we need to begin turning the knobs. But you can't start changing and tweaking and turning the knobs. You can't lead change. You can't move forward if you don't do a great job of evaluating your ministry system. So what should you evaluate? One, your programs. Are your programs effective? Are you seeing the results in your preschool and children's ministry? What about student ministry? What about your adult groups, whether it's Sunday school, life groups, small groups, connect groups, D groups, whatever version of that you use? Are you experiencing the results, the fruit that you want to see from that? Are those programs still aligned with your church's mission? Are they helping you move towards the destination that you want to get to, the one where you want to end up and what you want to accomplish. If not, those are things that we have to consider adjusting or discontinuing, and begin to identify programs that can help us accomplish what we want to see happen. Another thing to evaluate, volunteers. Are your volunteers equipped, trained, and are they supported and encouraged? So one of the things I'm working on right now is how can we do a better job of training. I think we do a pretty good job, and equipping, but I like to run 150 miles an hour. And so sometimes what I miss is they know that I'm appreciative because I tell them when I see them. But what can we do to help them feel supported and encouraged so that they can lead the ministry further to where then I can just take it by ourselves? And so we need to evaluate our volunteers. Do we need more volunteers in a certain place? Do we need to redistribute volunteers to a new initiative or a new program or a new opportunity? And so we've got to reflect on those things. And then when you reflect on your volunteers, I want you to think about how you go about recruiting and retaining your volunteers. You see, one of the things that's going to happen in January is as we turn the calendar year, I also jump all the way into summer planning. So we begin to think about the details of VBS Summerfest is what we call it, camps, other ministry things. And so have we done a good job last year in the way we led and supported and encouraged volunteers? So a lot of those volunteers will jump right back in immediately and do the thing that they've already done in the past. And so how are we retaining volunteers? And so I want you to reflect and evaluate your volunteer system. And then the third area that I want you to consider evaluating, and this is a huge one, is how you communicate, your communication. Now, I'm not talking about your sermons. I'm not talking about your Bible studies, although I would encourage you, if you teach and you preach and you speak, that I would encourage you to set aside some time to do some evaluation of how you're doing, because it's not an evaluation of your performance. It's an evaluation of how are you communicating, and are you communicating clearly, and are there some things you can be stretched on? I'll tell you, I went to a conference a couple of years ago, and my whole team just happened to be in the room with me, and the speaker talked about using visuals in your preaching, and that was like for me, I had just gotten where I had 2 or 3 visuals, but I wasn't using the power of visuals and video to really bring home the powerful point. And so I made a commitment, and I asked the staff team to hold me accountable that in addition to the points, the three or four points, and the scripture text, that I would have at least 2 visual pieces of content outside of the outline that I would share. And so you need to evaluate so that you can be the best that God wants you to be. That's really what we want. We want to be the best. We've only got one life to live and one life to serve and give. And so you want to evaluate and become the best in your preaching and teaching. So side note there, but your communication, what I'm talking about is how can you communicate to the whole church family what's going on and why it's going on. Communication is always a dance of why and what, why and what, why and what. Sometimes you need a lot more what, sometimes you need a lot more why, and you're constantly evaluating how you communicate. The third area, so we had celebrating and reflecting, we had evaluating, and the third, now we move into preparing for the new year, for the next year. And I absolutely love this. I begin preparing for the new year in October. I begin thinking about what I want to teach, what I want to preach, how I want to go about that. I begin thinking about what are going to be my personal goals. What's like one skill that I want to either learn or improve on. And so preparing for the new year. And so I want to encourage you, begin thinking about setting clear goals that will help you lead with purpose in 2025. Some people are really great at setting goals, and some people have an aversion to it, and they feel like it's too rigid, and it makes you get stuck. And so I want to encourage you that our goals help us stay focused on what matters most when we set good and when we set the right goals. And so I would like to encourage you to set 3 specific goals that align with your church's mission and your church's values. I wouldn't set 20. I wouldn't set 15. I wouldn't set 10. I want to encourage you to think about what are 3 things that if y'all accomplish this, if you look back this time next year and you look back and you were able to accomplish these 3 things, it would allow you to begin to see, it would allow you to see spiritual fruit in your community, in your church. You would reach out, you would see evangelism, you would see discipleship. What are those 3 things that if you were to accomplish these things, that it would make a significant impact on the life of your church family? The next thing I would encourage you to do is to plan a leadership retreat sometime in January or February. And you think, oh, wow, I don't know how to do that. We're a small church. I can't do that. Or I don't even have much of a team. There's only like 2 of us. And so here's what I would like you to do. If you can get away and find a place, you don't have to pay for it. If somebody has some space that you can just go and spend a day or a Friday night and a Saturday, and just to get away for conversations. Here's what I would say. If you have a ministry team, gather your ministry team. If you don't have a ministry team, go back and think about who are those key volunteers in the life of your church. Who are those core leaders? One, that have positions of influence, but others who are just influential voices in your church. And take 7, 8, 6, 8, 10 people, and y'all begin to think about and talk about the ministries that you've already have planned. And when you go back through that evaluation and you begin to tweak and turn the dials on what's happening and what things you need to adjust, and then just spending time in prayer. You see, it's important that 1, we encourage one another. We encourage one another with verbal words. And 2, we genuinely pray for one another and with one another as to what God is doing and what we hope to see him do in the life of our church. And so I want to encourage you, set 3 goals, plan and have a leadership retreat. And then I want you to think about launching 1 new initiative. Maybe it's a new program. Maybe it's an outreach event. Maybe it's a system program or a system improvement that's so significant that it creates this new initiative or this new focus. Something that will allow you to move to the next level. Something that will allow you to take spiritual ground that you've never been able to take before, or maybe you just haven't in a long time. So I want you to begin thinking about, what is the 1 thing? Don't start 5 things. Don't start 15 things. What is 1 thing that you can start this year? What is 1 initiative that you can start that will have a significant spiritual impact? I want you to be real careful when you think about all of these things. I don't know about you, but I'm not looking for more stuff to attend, and I'm not looking for more stuff to do. My task list, my calendar, and my game plan each week is full. But we need to be more aligned. Aligned is a word we don't use enough in church leadership and ministry leadership. We need to make sure that we have great alignment between what we're doing and where we want to go, and the rhythms that go with that. And so I just want to encourage you, when you think about new, when you think about evaluating, when you think about all of these adjustments or tweaks that you're going to do, you can't just think about adding, you have to think about subtracting. Jim Collins says you have to have a stop doing list. What are you going to stop doing so that you can do these things? And in churches, that is so unbelievably hard. And so that's why having a planning retreat is something that you can begin to have clarity with a group of people, and you can begin setting things in motion that may not take place for until August when back to school happens. And so just want to encourage you to prepare well for the new year. One of the things I want to do is I want to answer a couple of questions. These are questions that have come to me in the last few weeks. And so the first question is, how can we maintain momentum during the busy holiday season? I've had a couple of pastors ask the question kind of like this: how do we maintain momentum during the busy holiday season? And so my response would be simplify and focus on key ministry areas or key ministry things. It may be too late this year. One of the things you may have to put on your calendar for next September is to caution you to overload your calendar with too many things that don't lead you to focus on what's really most important. And I've learned that really there's two things. One, there's the gospel. We have the gospel message that we are to take and to share because the gospel changes people's lives. The gospel changes our life. We have the gospel and we have people. What else do we have? Gospel and people trump everything. They trump our programs. They trump. And so when you think about Christmas, think about those two things. Think about the gospel. How do we take time to create worship experiences, reflection opportunities for people to have on their own, whether it's through Advent or through other channels or other ways? We have the gospel, and then you have people. Enjoy people. Don't so over program. Don't get so busy that you can't enjoy people. There have been times where I've been booked multiple places on certain nights. Multiple Sunday school classes or having parties on the same nights. One of the things I've had to do is I've had to set the expectation up front. It's okay to say when they invite you, I've already got 3 places to be that night. And so what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to stop by for just a few minutes. And so because it's important, I want to be there. I want to see y'all. Just know that I may not be able to stay that long, or maybe may not be able to stay through the time. I have never had anyone get upset or frustrated at me when I've communicated that expectation up front. And it takes a little bit to get used to it because most of us as ministry leaders, we don't like saying no, and we're people pleasers. Most of us by nature are people pleasers, and we know that's not what people want to hear. But I just want to encourage you, set clear expectations up front. Then another question comes, what's the best way to show volunteers appreciation at the end of the year? And so I just think it's important that you be personal and you be specific. It's so easy to throw everything in just a mass giveaway where you're just giving away stuff. And they're thankful and they're grateful, but I think volunteers, what they want to hear from their pastor, what they want to hear from their ministry leader is that you took time to handwrite a note. I go back to that, the power of written words, being able to maybe in a room of people to go around one by one and tell people something that you're thankful for, something that you appreciate in their life and the way that it affects your church and ministry. And so I just want to encourage you, be personal and be specific. So we're in December. And I know you have a lot of things going on. You're super busy. You're living in 2 worlds. You're trying to end this year. You're trying to attend all these things. And you're doing Christmas at church and at home, trying to be present at home. And you're thinking about the new year. And so the thing that I want to leave you with today is don't lose your heart in caring for somebody else. And what I mean by that is don't lose taking a spiritual journey yourself this Christmas. There are multiple Bible reading plans on the YouVersion Bible app, ways that you can navigate spiritually this season. And so I just want to encourage you, don't let all of your spiritual experience this Christmas be in preparing for what you have to preach, what you have to teach, where you have to go. Make sure you have some private time because we have to renew our hearts as leaders if we're going to lead people to experience right now the incarnation, the birth of Jesus. We have to renew our hearts in a way that it allows them to experience everything that God wants them to this Christmas. So I've got 2 episodes coming out next week, and I can't wait to share these 2 things with you, and I'm really looking forward to 2025 and the Leading Your Church podcast. We're also starting a brand new newsletter called the 20 Mile March. And this will give you weekly things that you can do to become small pieces, things that you can do to become a better leader. We're going to talk more about that 20 Mile March here next week. So you all have a great weekend, and I will see you next week on the Leading Your Church podcast. Welcome back, and I'm glad to have this podcast up and running again. Have a great weekend.